Oh, it does say live.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the first episode of the I don't know what the name of the show is called, but it's a collaboration between LMTV and T4J, which stands for Technology for the Journey. And I'd like to introduce my fellow collaborators, Dr. Paul Smith and Patrolman Officer, actually, Officer Casey Mullis. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
By the way, we're all three of us are authors of Love My Tour, so we have multiple roles, right? Multi roles, right?
Very much so.
Yeah. So Paul, I guess we owe everybody an introduction. You and I actually know each other a long, long time ago. Back in the
Yeah,
days.
I don't even want to know how many.
Uh-huh. Go ahead.
I don't even want to know how many years it's been, but I think I first learned about you when you were finishing your doctoral dissertation at Berkeley.
And I was looking for
And
money.
I think I read. Yeah, I think I was the third guy to actually read it. The first two were on your committee, and I found it pretty interesting because I was working in a similar field, and we crossed paths many times since then. So.
Well, I think that's where you were wrong. Nobody ever read your dissertation, not even people on your committee.
That may be true. Maybe the only one who read it.
Yeah, I think you're the only one who read it. But actually, I think there are very few people in the world who actually have a degree in applied mechanics, just in case you were wondering what applied mechanics is, because my wife, for the longest time, thought that I fixed cars. He thought that was my job. And
my wife wonders why I can't seem to fix anything. What was your education good for?
Now, Paul, here's a trick. When you speak, the way this works is that, especially when you're on Wi-Fi, when you speak, then all of a sudden Google pay attention to you. So what you have to do is you have to kind of make a little bit of noise before you actually go on to talk. I don't know if you understand
So
what I mean.
unlike with, yeah, I think I get it. Unlike with a lot of things, it's okay to say before you talk because triggers Google.
Yeah, that actually is a requirement because I believe that's how Google engineers talk.
Well, I think I understand what you're saying now. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah. So
I've already
anyway, we that was a long, long time ago when we were in a very different world, right? When we were really worried about mathematics and Hamilton theorems and stuff like that, and I tend to I guess I move away from that further than you have, Paul.
Well, I think that's probably true. I've sort of remained loosely connected to that in one way or another. As you know, I was an adjunct professor at the School of Mines for a while and doing some teaching, kind of like what you were doing. And then I've remained loosely connected to the hard disk drive industry pretty much the whole time, most of my career. So.
Actually, again, that's not what I was doing at UCLA. I did have a professor job at UCLA, but we don't teach at UCs.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I thought you were a pretty good teacher whenever I ran into you, but yeah, I know I understand. It's about in grant writing. I get it.
You know, you actually you were my sponsor. You actually meaning that you actually knew more about what I do at the university than anybody else, which is that I was basically running my own business, getting research grants, supporting graduate students, right? And then there's this thing called teaching, which you do, and it's a couple hours a week, and you just have to show up for it.
Yeah, yes, well, I kind of understand that a little bit from my stint at the School of Mines because I was a pure teacher. I was an adjunct, so I basically was hired to teach classes that professors didn't really want to teach and were able to come up with money to hire an adjunct for.
Yeah, so you're looking at the guy who didn't want to teach and want to hire you.
Yes, I recognize you actually for that reason. And of course, I was a hero because I love teaching and I love doing that, and it relieved them from doing something they didn't like doing. So I was actually very popular in the department. So that was fun.
But you're not doing that anymore, right?
Yes, that's correct. I was contacted by this company here in Santa Barbara, which got me out of Colorado back to Santa Barbara, and a bunch of people I used to work with in the hard disk drive days for a company that has since gone bankrupt. But they started a new company, and they found me, and they said, "Well, why don't you come out here and work with us again?" And it's been a lot of fun. I've been enjoying it. So.
Did I ever mention to you, Paul, that I looked up your company. I don't know if you want to name the company, but I did look up your company. And did you know that the parent company, it's a Singapore company. I guess I could say that. Did you know that they were actually one of my investors?
I actually didn't know that, but it's not too surprising to me. Not long after I joined Intraplex, which is the original company here in Santa Barbara, and started with them, they were bought by MMI, which is the company that you're referring to. I don't mind mentioning them. And MMI is a holding company that owns a bunch of companies in oil and gas, medical devices, aerospace, and the computer hard drive industry. They, in turn, are owned by KKR, which is a huge Dow Jones, well, not Dow Jones, but a huge NYSE-listed venture firm. So it's a hierarchy of venture capitalists, your favorite people, that basically are my bosses.
Hey, it's too early to insult me like that.
Yeah, well,
you're out of that now. They're not my favorite people. They're just people, okay?
Okay, all right.
So, but anyway, interestingly, MMI, the name of the company is called Micro Machines Inc. Or Micro Machines, Micro Machines Inc. Maybe. Yeah, it's a Taiwanese. It's a Singapore company, and I actually know them, and they were actually invested in my company back in the days when long before they were bought out by the conglomerate, and they were an independent company. And the reason why they're related to the disk drive industry, which you and I worked on, is that they were actually machining the aluminum casing for the disk drives. And the guy who started the company, who's since sold out and retired, I hope, he looked us up because he couldn't believe that someone else would be doing more micro machining than he does. And that was the days when I left the university and started my own company doing micro machining. You remember those days? Making pressure sensors.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that very well. Of course, we even had some discussions with Applied Magnetics and those guys who were doing wafers and thin film heads as to whether there might be some synergy there. But
yeah. Talking about selling shit that you don't have. I mean, I did all that.
Yeah, that goes way back.
Yeah, okay, all right. So rather than bore, I don't want to bore Casey too much. Casey's looking at us. He said, look, these are two old phobies talking now. So the genesis of today's show, first of all, we had a Saturday show before this, right, Casey, remember? And for some reason, we just kind of stopped doing it. But I always wanted to have a Saturday show, but I didn't want it to be too free formatted. There's a sometimes it's nice to be free formatted. You allow people to just say what they want, but then after a while, after people kind of finish telling you what they wanted to, what's on their mind, it kind of goes off. So I want to have a focus. And then when did you start writing your blog, Paul?
Well, I got interested in doing this, I think it was last April, so it's been almost a year now, on this latest venture with Technology for the Journey. I'd actually written a blog long before that, one that nobody read, prior to when I started writing for Love My Tool. But the Technology for the Journey started a little over a year ago. I found myself writing a lot of shorter little paragraphs about things, just sort of as a hobby, and kind of enjoying doing that. And I thought, well, what the heck? I'll just play with the idea of having a web page and see how that goes. So I've been sort of working my way through that, gradually learning as I go, and it's been a lot of fun for me.
So a little bit of background. we have about half a dozen writers, including Casey, for Love My Tool, and we have a way of sharing a revenue. It's a very good thing. And out of that half a dozen writers, I used to write, and I stopped writing it after a while. There's a reason for that. I'll talk about it. But now, when I was writing for Love My Tool, Paul and I are the only two kind of non-technical writer. We write loosely about just observations and stuff. We try not to write about religion and politics, right, Paul?
Yeah, those are supposedly taboo subjects, although I think every so often they sort of leak into our writing.
Yeah.
It's not the main subject, you're right.
Yeah. But we were the only two technical writer, and people, it's a good mix. And Casey is one of the technical writer. He actually writes about networking and security and so forth. And then I guess so we kind of limit our writing to once a month. Otherwise, it kind of it wouldn't work too well. And then I think that might be one of the reason, Paul, right, that you started this blog called actually it's called tech4thejourney.com. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of it. Basically, you're right, Danny. I find myself sitting down in these little bursts of writing and knocking out 3 or 4 sort of short articles quickly, and finding myself wondering, well, should one of those be developed into a longer one for the monthly Love My Tool article? In the meantime, I had these other 3 or 4 sitting around that were going nowhere. I thought, well, maybe there's a place for those, more like little short blog posts. And so that's part of the reason, I think, for doing that. And also, I think you're right, the Love My Tool is more of a technical focus. And for me, it's more of a philosophical, technology is really fascinating. There's guys like Casey who really understand that well and how it works, and in particular security on the internet, and networking and all. But I was more interested in how the technology changes our culture, how it changes who we are. And you can find plenty of blogs to learn about the latest bling, what's going on at the Consumer Electronics Show, what's happening in the world of technology. But sometimes I think we lose sight of what we leave behind when we adopt new technologies, what we lost in our culture when we moved in that direction. So that's kind of my focus.
Yeah, and that's why I get excited. And I thought I've been wanting to so ever since you started writing, I said, wow, this is going to be a great thing for Love My Tool, kind of bringing in that perspective. And so, but I wasn't sure if you're going to continue writing, Paul. That's why I didn't start early.
Probably run out.
Yeah, I said, well, what if it's just a phase in his life, you know? It might still be, but
yeah, well, it's still fun. So I think as long as it stays fun, we'll keep going. And it's kind of exciting to get it connected a little bit more to the group here. I know there's a lot of things that have come up in my writing and my thinking that I thought about Casey because of his experience with the network and the security and some of the implications of that. There's a lot of overlap there, and I hope we can get him involved in some discussions of that. An obvious one lately is the cyber wars that are happening, and how Anonymous has decided they're going to go out and attack the jihadists. And now we got this whole cyber war thing going on. It's nice because people don't get killed; they just get their hard drives wiped out or whatever. But there's a lot of overlap there too. It should be interesting.
The funny thing is, Paul, that the media is picking up on a lot of this stuff now because of the publicity of it, but really, cyber war has been going on for years. It's just now getting brought into the mass media and into the public eye.
Actually, I wonder. At some point, it's like the word cyber. It's like putting a head on something, right? It's also you see something and you said, well, let me put a head on it and I'll call it something else. So, but I really wonder if at some point we just stop calling it cyber war. Just say that's just how wars are being fought now. That's just the way it's done now. These other
Yeah,
things, these other things, we
you,
just call it armed conflict, right?
yeah, you raise a very good point. I think there's just, just conflict. Period. I mean, we've kind of gotten away from that in a way. We love the idea of drones and
Yeah, I mean
remotely piloted vehicles.
exactly. I mean, we would. I mean, we're doing this thing. You know, it's almost like the pre-crime. You know, we just go and murder people with drones. That way, you know, they would not attack us.
Well, and Paul, I guess that tech, your new blog. That's even for Christmas this year. My wife got me a drone, and they're now to the affordable price that. And this particular model is a DJI Phantom 2, and it's good for a third mile with a high definition camera, roughly 650 feet without any modifications to the antennas. And it can fly autonomously or remote control. Just talk about technology in the future. It's getting smaller and affordable for your average Joe.
Yeah, I read that. And I saw that thing. I saw you got it out of the box early and got in trouble for doing that, and I don't blame you. I would have too, but I'm just thankful that I live out of range from you. So
Yeah, but there's always the strong arm of the law.
yeah, that's true.
Well, no, Casey is the law. You know that, right?
Yeah, I know that. I'm being very careful here.
So,
But it has a double-edged sword. It's a good thing. It's a good tool. You got some people who argue privacy issues, but on the flip side of the coin, let's look at the benefit of a drone when someone goes missing, a child goes missing, or an Alzheimer patient goes missing, wanders off in the woods. It takes time to get a helicopter in the air. I can have this mini drone up and flying in 2 minutes. So
Yeah, I think that's pretty exciting. There's a lot of really good uses of these things. That's exactly kind of the point of the whole technology for the journey thing. I mean, this technology changes our society, but is it good or bad? I think about the cell phone tracking as another example. When my kids were young, they would have just never gone for that. I'm going to set your cell phone up so I can know where you are all the time. That never would have flown. Never would have gotten away with that. But
can I put in my perspective on? I really want an audience. If there's any audience out there, there might be. You never know. I think the format of the show is really, we want to talk about articles that Paul has written recently that I have read and Casey probably read, and maybe kind of use those as anchor. And so I pull up Paul's website, techforthejourney.com, and the last two articles he wrote, one is called "Digital is Not Always the Answer," and then the other one is called "Technology is Probably a Good Thing." So I want to kind of bring those two back, because since we only have about 6 minutes left, and bring it back to this drone technology that Casey mentioned. And I want to share with you my recent experience to Hong Kong. And prior to going to Hong Kong, just a month ago, I've been, like watching nonstop the event that went on in Hong Kong, which I'm sure all of you have kind of read about, which is what they call the Occupy Central movement, and then at some point called the Umbrella Revolution, which is basically that. Kind of give you a little background, is that Hong Kong was a colony of the British Empire, but as it turns out, they only own, quote unquote, half of it. The other half they rented from the Qing dynasty back in the days, and that lease expired in 1997. So when they went and tried to negotiate it with the Chinese government, the communist government, the new government basically said, well, we don't recognize the treaty that you signed, so therefore we don't recognize 1997. So there is no renewing of the lease. We want everything back. So in 1997, Hong Kong became part of China, but it did it in such a way that they were able to retain their own government, so to speak. But there was, as in always these things, there's always a little bit of Not everything is negotiated out, and although they gave themselves a window, which is to work out the free election. So the idea was that they were going to have free election in 2017. But the way it did it was that basically the Chinese government says, you can have free elections, but I have to pick the candidates. And that started a kind of a revolt. And there's close to, I don't know the exact number, but there were probably 250,000 people went on the street to protest. Now, the reason I said all that is technology actually did play an important part of this. And I want to rewind back to 1989 when they had the June 4th massacre in Tiananmen Square. And that was a time when China, I mean, still China is under communist control today, more so than ever. But back then, all of a sudden people find out about this event in Tiananmen Square, and there were two pieces of technology that was involved that was very important. One was that if you remember, maybe you don't, but the event actually occurred right after a visit from the Russian chairman at the time. What is his name? Gorbachev, right? And he had just visited Beijing, and so a lot of video equipment and satellite equipment were left behind by the network news. So we were able to see some of the images that was happening, in 1989. But that was for our consumption. The people inside China didn't get to see that, right? Obviously, and there were people in Beijing and in Shanghai that they were basically having the same revolt, but they weren't communicating. And the technology that they used back then that allows them to communicate, to know that there are actually people in different cities that had the same kind of concern, was fax machine. So people in Beijing were faxing the news to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong was faxing it back to Shanghai. That's how they communicate. That's all of a sudden they had this revolution or revolt, because they know that other cities, our people are doing it. That's how revolution, you start by one person, but other people joined in, but there needs to be communication. Well, this is the background information. But in Hong Kong, just 6 months ago, or actually just a few months ago, the technology was cell phone and drone. So they were able, they actually took a drone, and now, you have to understand that in Hong Kong, you can't just fly a drone. So to do that is illegal. So someone actually had a drone with the HD camera, and they actually flew between the high-rises and saw these people, because it wasn't reported, right? But they were able to communicate with each other to say, wow, all of a sudden 250 people on the street, right? And they were able to see all these people, occupying the downtown area and everywhere else, and they were able to communicate with each other through Facebook and Twitter, and because everything else was shut down. Okay, so going back, I would say, yeah, technology was a good thing.
Yes,
that's a really interesting story, and the crowd. I'm sure Officer Mullis has trained a lot about this. The whole crowd psychology thing that you worry about when you're in law enforcement. When you reach critical mass with a bunch of people and they start doing things that one or two people wouldn't do, but the crowd gives them that anonymity, and those kind of technologies that you describe, Denny, give you the ability to generate that mass, right? If you and I want to go out and start a protest, well, we call our friends, we just can't get anybody interested, it's too early, they haven't had their coffee yet, whatever, it's hard to get that going. But if you can show a little video, yeah, there's already 100 people, there's already 1,000 people, there's all this Twitter traffic, oh yeah, now I'll go and join, and now I'll be a part of that, because now all of a sudden it's a movement, and that really has changed the world, hasn't it?
Yeah, and what was even, there was a little bit of information, which is that actually the protesters were very technology savvy, amazingly so, and more so. I mean, like orders of magnitude better than the government, and so the government was actually thinking about shutting down the cellular network, right? Because they figured out that's how they communicate with each other, but they actually never did it, because that would shut down the entire city. Okay, so but as a backup, actually I remember as a backup, the protesters had a piece of software that they loaded on the cell phone, and they were getting ready to launch it, but they never did because the government never shut down the cell network. But the technology actually allows them to do everything that they would normally do uh, with Bluetooth. So the idea is that you're protesting, right? You're in the street, you know, you're shoulder to shoulder. Who cares if there's a cellular coverage? Because all the cell phones are now connected with Bluetooth. But they never actually deployed that, and because there was no need. So that's just um, so I think that's sort of right, isn't it, Paul? That's sort of the kind of a summary. I would think that that's really the thinking behind Tech for the Journey, is that we're not against technology.
No, I think you're right, and there's two pieces of it, Danny, and you've just described one really important one, in that it changes the culture in dramatic ways in terms of things it adds, and that's a great example of an additive technology thing. But there's also things we've left behind, and we can probably save this for another time because I know we're running low on time. But there's some things that you lose when you add technology, and I'm actually writing a piece now that'll talk about that. Maybe it'll be done in time for next week. I don't know, but things that you lose.
I think you actually have another article that somehow doesn't show up on your blog, which is the piece that talks about analog technology. Right?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. I didn't hear what you said. You broke up.
Oh, I said, didn't you just finish another article that? Okay. I'm actually it's in the one that talks about digital is not always the answer. Yeah, you have another article that is named "Digital is not always the answer," and when we talk about stuff that we left behind, those are mostly analog technology, right?
Yeah, I think there's the analog technology, and there's just the things that we don't do anymore that may have enhanced our culture. There's a piece in that thing that you talked about with regard to teaching, how teaching online in massive numbers loses that connection you get in a lecture room where the professor looks out and he sees these blank stares, and you know that well, I'm sure, and you think, okay.
Well,
that didn't.
It's funny you said that. It's funny you said that, and I actually got out of teaching just right before that transition, and as soon as I got out of teaching, it was a time when Wi-Fi was started to be available on campus, and kids start to bring their laptop to classrooms. But I got out right before that. And so I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you a question. Even though you were actually doing physical teaching, you weren't doing online teaching. I suspect that most of your students are kind of halfway online already, right? They were busy with the laptop already.
That's actually true, and most of them had laptops and iPads that they could download their textbooks onto and rent textbooks electronically, which is a cool idea. They also had this thing called an iClicker, which in a simple sense is a little Wi-Fi device that every student's required to buy, that they can give you sort of like multiple choice feedback. So you can ask a question and have an instant multiple choice test, or they can, are you guys understanding this? And you get a yes, no electronically rather than a show of hands, which some students are afraid to raise their hand. I don't get it. But they will push a button on their little Wi-Fi device that says, I don't get it. So that was starting to come into play too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool, well, I'm glad that I got out of teaching. I'm glad that I got out of teaching. Actually, Paul, I was an assistant professor at UCLA, and our chancellor at the time is a gentleman by the name of Chuck Young, who actually never got tenure. He was an assistant professor. He was about to be kicked out of the university like I did, but but he decided that he wanted to go into administration. So he then, from there he worked his way up to be the chancellor, and one of the best, well-known, most capable chancellor of the entire UC system. He basically built UCLA, and I was at the university for 9 years, and every year, I would go and listen to his speech at the commencement. And the year that I decided that teaching is not for me was the year when I noticed that when he started to explain to the parents, instead of just saying 4-year education, he said 4-year education experience. And he just put in that word, and I said, oh, okay, I am now in the service industry. So all these things that you talk about with the iClicker and the feedback, that's what we do at Chipotle's. That's what we tell the guys, you're putting too much beans in the burritos, man.
Yeah, that's so true. Things have really changed a lot, man. And I'm not sure which direction it's going now. I don't know that the university's actually sure which direction they want to go with the whole thing, but
yeah,
it's definitely changing.
Before we get out of here, I want to add one thing about the word anonymity that you used, Paul. And in today's world with technology, it brings a lot of good to the table, but one of the bads, I think, is anonymity is given up. I'd say a lot of privacy is given up, and most of the younger generation with social media posting their whole lives out there on the internet, and then they can't understand why, there is no privacy today.
Well, and then in China, you have the opposite.
Yeah, that's an issue too. We could spend a lot of time talking about that. I know that when I saw this big scandal because all these stars had their nude pictures online, I thought, well, wait a minute, why were you taking those and putting them out there in the first place? I mean, I don't quite understand that. But anyway, that's just the way.
Yeah,
it is.
I think that's when you say, well, probably you should have had that in an analog format.
Yeah, or maybe in a shoebox somewhere would have been a better idea.
Another analog format.
That's right.
Hey, listen, guys. I think that we should have some discipline in trying to make this just a half-an-hour show. And now the trick to do any of these, Paul, and I think you heard me say this before, is we don't even have to do it better. We just have to keep doing it.
Yeah, I think that's true, Denny, and I think the discipline's a good idea too. As you have tried to keep us on track, I think having a topic in mind, and because there's a lot we can wander around on and have fun with, even with just sticking to one topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm good for keeping it up. Let's just do it. It'll get better, I'm sure. It can't.
Okay.
It can't not
Okay.
get.
Well, Casey, you'll notice that you are playing a very important role today. You are our only other audience.
I hope I did my job well.
You did it excellent. It was good. Well,
It was a pleasure to finally meet you, by the way.
You too, Paul.
Yeah, and Paul, it's been what, 8 years now since I even seen you on. I mean, not to mention physical, even on the video, it's been a number of years.
Yeah, we're not that far apart, Denny. We have to have coffee sometime. We'll figure it out.
Well, I did try to meet you. It's just that every time I'm thinking you're in Santa Barbara, you're in Colorado, and then when I think that you're in Colorado, you're in Santa Barbara. It confuses me, man.
Well, I think you have a way of finding out, because it seems like whenever I'm out of town, you say, "Hey, I'm in town." So I don't know. You must be doing some research.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
you must be Googling, finding.
Yeah. So with that, we're going to close the show. So the idea is that this is really we don't have to. We're not limiting ourselves to just the technology for the journey blog, although we are using it as an anchor. So for those of you who want to join us next week, this would be hopefully every Saturday at 6:30 my time, which is Pacific time. 7th. That would you're in the Mountain Time, right, Paul? Right now.
Actually, right now I'm in Santa Barbara, so I'm in the same time zone you are.
Oh, you are.
But when I am. When I am in Colorado, it'll be 7:30. That's right. Okay.
So are you going home today?
No, actually, my wife's coming out here soon. So.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
The center
Yeah.
of mass of the Smith family is moving west now.
Well, the center of mass is wherever your wife is. Come on, man.
That's what I'm talking about. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, we're going to close the show. See you next week. Thank you, Casey.
Yes, sir.
And
Thank you, Casey.
thank you, Paul. See you again.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Dan. Bye now.